that will bring us for our lesson today with Lein, and it's her second on relationships. Who's next? Okay.
It's a song I wrote. I'm looking for a miracle everywhere that I go, and I'm dreaming of the day glow to fill up my eyes, and I'm dreaming of the good times, all those crazy in-between times, and the wild days and nights when the sun's so bright you're blinded by love. Oh, you know what though, rain it keeps falling, and there's thunder and lightning. No need to be frightened, no, no, no. Just wait out the storm, keep on looking for the rainbow. Everywhere that you go, even though the rain, the hard times, you know, they might keep on coming down. It's a natural fact, you know, you'll find the rainbow when the sun's at your back. So keep on looking for the rainbow everywhere that you go. Just keep looking for a rainbow.
So last week we talked about the primary relationship, and that relationship was the relationship with a higher power, the relationship with the presence, with the one. And so what's next? Who's the next relationship? Reverend Dr. Jim Lockhart says this: after our relationship with Spirit, the next most important relationship we have is with ourselves. Loving ourselves and accepting our own self-worth form the basis of our love for others. We cannot love others more than we love ourselves. Our outer relationships, all of them, reflect our relationship with our inner self. Well, I know we've heard that, is that you can't love other people if you don't love yourself. But sometimes I think it feels like we might feel, well, I'm not everything I should be. But I can see that you, even in maybe your imperfections or the little things you do, they might be a little annoying, but I can see the presence in you, like the daily word. I can see the holiness in you. Perhaps more than I can see it myself. So maybe I feel like I'm loving other people more than loving myself. Or if we happen to be one of those people that gives a lot, that gives and gives and gives, we may feel like I'm loving you more than I'm loving myself. But what Dr. Jim Goddard said, Lockhart said, is a spiritual truth. And so somehow we have to get to that place where we understand, okay, he must be talking about not just about the things that we do, but some deeper level of understanding of who we are and who I am in relation to others and who I am in relation to that primary relationship that we talked about last week with the presence. But how many times do we tell ourselves things like, I don't know why you said that, or couldn't you have just figured that out? We're saying this to ourselves. I'm so stupid. Or God, you know better than doing that. Or we'll stay up late at night, maybe even in the middle of the night, thinking about, I should have done this instead. All of these shoulda, coulda, woulda things that we do to ourselves. These things where we're over and over repeatedly telling ourselves how we missed the mark, how we're not what we should be. Things like, I'm inadequate, I'm less than, others are more important, I don't have that level of self-worth. I've seen some nods, so I know I'm not alone in this, in this little mantra that goes through the mind, right? Dr. Alan Wallace is a professor of Buddhism, and he relayed this story. He said that in 1990, it's a true story, in 1990 the Dalai Lama was meeting at a conference with some Western psychologists and neuroscientists, and the topic was on the role of the mind, but more importantly, emotions in healing. Emotions in healing. And so there was a woman there called Sharon Salzberg. Now, you may have heard of her, but she's very well known, well respected. She teaches meditation, a particular form of meditation in the Theravada tradition, and she also teaches the practice of metta, which is loving kindness, a big Buddhist concept. And so she asked the Dalai Lama, she said, in my teaching of metta, of loving kindness, I start first with teaching us how to love ourselves. And then once we're in that frame, once we get there, then we move out to those closer around us, and then we move out to others, and even those we like, and eventually people we don't know at all. And so she said, I'm wondering, because the Dalai Lama has a different form of Buddhism, it's a Tibetan Buddhism. She said, I wonder if you would consider what we do, starting with ourselves, I wonder if you would consider that unskilled. She really wanted to know. But she says, oh, but before you answer, I would like you to know that one thing we experience in the West is we have so many people who don't think they're worth very much. And their level of self-worth is very low. And they don't even think they're worth having happiness in their life. And some of it even goes to self-deprecation and even to self-hate. So that's why we start with loving ourselves when we do the practice of loving kindness, metta. So what happened next was kind of surprising. The Dalai Lama kind of looked at her and said, well, okay, I'm not really sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying people don't love themselves? Please explain this to me. And she goes through a whole explanation again, you know. We start with loving because people have a self-worth issue. Well, he was floored. It was like you told him that we were aliens or something. He couldn't believe it. He turned around to his Tibetan monks, and they had this conversation in Tibetan about, they're saying this. Can you believe it? In Tibetan, they don't even have a word for guilt. They couldn't believe that. It's just like, can you believe they're this way? And then, of course, he answered, well, yes, of course, if that's the case, that you want to start with yourself. You want to start with loving yourself. the meta, loving kindness. Begin with yourself and then move out to others. But when I heard that, I thought, wow, one thing it tells me is that this is not innate. Our sense of putting ourselves down is not innate, because there are people across the globe that don't do that at all. They don't even know what is that. And apparently it's most strong in America, and then it's a little less strong in Europe. But the further east you go, the more and more it just dissolves away. Wow.
What's that about?
That's what I'm thinking. What is that about? I'm sure there are a lot of variables that went into it. And one of the things that I was reminded this morning is that, Americans were formed by Puritans, and so they had a very strict idea of what was right and wrong and sin and all of that. And we've grown up with a lot of that as a fundamental basis of things, although we've grown a lot out of it. Still, there's a lot still being taught about sin and us being sinful, which in Unity, of course, we don't talk about being inherently sinful. We talk about an inherent blessing. But there is that belief, and then there's also all of the commercials that we see. Mm-hmm. Everything is telling you, you are not enough until you buy this, mm-hmm. and then you'll be enough. See, so we have it coming at us all the time. All the time. You need this in order to be whole. It's almost everywhere. So, I'm sure there are other reasons why we're that way. And I'm not here to say I've done a lot of research and figured it all out. But one thing I do know is that we've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten who we are. I was in New Thought for 25 years before for 25 years, say. And I knew I could tell you we're born in the image and likeness of God. We're one with all that is, that we're whole, perfect, and complete. I could tell you all of those things. But then I read a reading from this book called This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes, and a particular passage in it brought me to an entirely new level of understanding who and what we were, who and what we are. And I quote, God has made you out of himself. The only material he had was the substance of his own being. The only mind he had to implant in you was his mind. The only spirit he had to impart was his own spirit. That's all that was there. Makes me take a deep breath. Even now when I read that, it's so powerful. Because a lot of times, even in New Thought, we're fully human and we have this little God spark inside of our heart. But no, we're 100% the presence, all of us. And not only the physical, but the spiritual that extends out beyond the physical. All of us is the present. We're made out of God's stuff. We're made out of it. We're already a spiritual being. We can't get more spiritual. We're already 100% spiritual. So, when I think about it in those terms, I think, how could I possibly ever put down something that's already 100% spiritual? I mean, how could we say that about the presence? And each one of us is that presence. Hafiz is a poet I love, a Sufi poet. He speaks about love and beauty, and he calls the presence the beloved. He says this: the place you are right now, God circled on a map for you. Wherever your eyes and arms and heart can move against the earth and the sky, the beloved has bowed there. Our beloved has bowed there, knowing you were coming. I thought how beautiful the presence, knowing that we're being created out of it into a particular formation, has prepared us with such love and devotion. But we've forgotten how to listen to that inner voice, the inner voice of the beloved. And we've forgotten how to distinguish between it and that critical inner voice, the inner critic, some people call it. Protective personality, some people call it. See, how do we distinguish between this voice and that voice? Like when it says you should be doing this, well, maybe it's right. Maybe that's my heart. Maybe I should be doing this. Or other things that it tells us. How do we distinguish? Elizabeth Gilbert says this: any voice you have that attacks you in any way is not your higher self. In any way, it's not your higher self. It's not. It's that protective personality. Some people call it the ego. Megan Watterson wrote a book called Mary Magdalene Revealed, and it's based upon the Gospel of Mary. Now, I don't know if you know about the Gospel of Mary. It wasn't included in the New Testament, but it is a gospel. It was written by Mary Magdalene. It was written in the early, probably early 2nd century, so it ranks there along with all of the other early writings as far as its authenticity. They've authenticated it several ways. And in this, in the Gospel of Mary, a lot of it is the disciples and Mary asking questions of Jesus and him responding. So this is one of the things that Jesus says in that gospel. He says, the power of ignorance is what asks, where are you going? You're bound in all this badness over here. You're not good. That's the power of ignorance. But then he says, the soul, who knows really what you are, the soul says back, why do you judge me, ignorance, since I have not passed judgment? You get it? The soul never passes judgment. It's ignorance that causes us to judge. You know, I've read in the other Gospels, judge not so that you won't be judged. And so sometimes that can be like, oh, you better not because this bad thing's coming if you do. But I think really, I don't think Jesus would have said it like that. I think the intention is more like, don't judge. Because every time you let ignorance judge, it kind of sticks to you more and clings to you. And before long, you have all these judgments that you're being judged yourself by. Mm-hmm. It's really more like what happens to us. But this judgment, it's like being unconscious. It's ignorance. It's just not being aware. And the soul refuses to do there. It refuses to go there. It refuses to judge. Once again, if the soul, who is really unfettered by the mind, which makes up stories, we all know that, okay? If the soul never judges, then why do we let our minds judge us? So we're talking about our relationship with ourselves today. And for a lot of people, it needs a lot of work. Mm-hmm. I would say I'm grateful personally that I've been in New Thought. that I've had these new concepts, that I can start working on that relationship, that I can grow into what is that I am, and with an understanding of that, so that when I say I see you, I know you, that I'm really talking about the presence that you are, just like the presence that I am. See, in that respect, we really can love others when we know ourselves. Because if we don't know ourselves as that presence, then how can we claim another one is? Yeah. So I have some tools for us today to help us move along the path. And last week my acronym was 1. Right, the first relation. So today my acronym is 2. Very creative, right? But it stands for the second relationship. And so the T, TWO, the T stands for turn from the voice of judgment. Mm-hmm. Turn from it. Now, a lot of times we may think, okay, I'll just, if I say something bad to myself, I'll just say the reverse of it. So that can seem like just putting a whole bunch of icing on top of a burnt cake, So what I'm really talking about is getting that additional level of understanding, of having a transformation in thought, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, to get that transformation so that we're actually seeing in an entirely different way. Ernest Holmes, in his book, This Thing Called You, says this. He says, when the first electricity was installed in the first house, okay, there was light where there was no light before. Now the darkness doesn't come along and say, why didn't you come along before? The darkness doesn't say, why didn't you show up? The darkness doesn't say, you shouldn't even be here because I've been here so long that you don't belong here. No, the light came and it lit the room, and darkness wasn't anymore. It didn't say, I'm going to sue you, light, for coming in and taking over my territory. No. The light came and said, behold, I come. And the darkness just disappeared. So, can we be that way when we turn from the sense of judgment that we have? Can we simply turn without additional judgment that we were judging? Because we can go down that track. We can judge ourselves for judging, and then judge ourselves for judging ourselves for judging, and that can go on forever. But can we just turn the light on? Can we just see it differently? Can we just say, no, not that, this. I am already 100% spiritual. I am not that thing that my mind keeps telling me that I am. So turn from the voice of judgment. Neil Donald Walsh, in Conversations with God, reminds us that the soul enters the body, and the body lives, and its purpose is to evolve. We're here to evolve. He says this, to become everything we're becoming. This is the job we came here to do, is to evolve. Well, by its very definition, when we evolve, we start at one place, and then we grow a little, we evolve, and then we grow a little more, we evolve. So that where you end up over here at any point in time is going to be more than what you started out with. That's by definition. Well, if we're here to evolve, then it means we're supposed to be over here knowing exactly what we know and not knowing what we don't know at that point in time. So let's not judge it. Yes, I was less informed. Yes, I was less understanding. But now I know. the light came on. So turn from that voice of judgment. That's the T. Now, W stands for worth. Claim your worth. Quoting again from Ernest Holmes, said, "You may accept that the universe is filled with a divine and infinite presence, perhaps the infinite of yourself, not your limited self, but the divine self that you must be. The greatest minds of the ages have accepted that this is true. Socrates called it his spirit. Jesus, his Father in heaven. Some mystics call it the Atman. Why don't you just call it you, your complete self? For surely this is what they've all meant." Okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's just call it me. This presence, it's me. Each one of us, it's me. And knowing that means I know that I have self-worth. I'm worth it. Reverend Dr. Jim Goddard says having a healthy self-concept means we first recognize our relationship to spirit, we just talked about that, and the innate worthiness in that relationship. As expressions of spirit, we are worthy of love simply because we exist. We're worthy of good simply because we exist. We're worthy of health simply because we exist. We're worthy of abundance simply because we exist. So let's claim it. No longer do we want to look out there and say, "Oh, I couldn't have that." Why not? You were the living embodiment of the presence of God. So, claim your worth. That's the W. Now the O stands for open up. Open up. We want to open our heart. We want to open our mind. We want to open ourselves up to more possibility, to having a new idea, to being able to claim our worth. And that involves not only work on the mental side. Ernest Holmes says, keep the doorway of your mind open. So we want to not only, keep it open with our feeling and thinking and communicating and all of those things we do, but we want to open our heart and include ourselves in there. A lot of times when I go into meditation about, and we want to center in the heart, I'll say, think of someone you love, and so we can easily put them in our heart, and then from there we kind of expand out. But do we include ourselves there? Can you feel yourself in your heart and then feel love? Let's open ourselves to that. And another thing is the physical often will reflect what's going on in the spiritual. So how many of us kind of walk around like this, kind of protecting our heart? We don't want to. We make small gestures here to kind of keep our arms here. How many of us have really opened up physically? Opened up physically. Let's do that. If you feel comfortable, open wide. Wide. Oh, I feel like I had an aha or something. My breath comes in. Oh, open up. That even that physical gesture of opening like that can really bring us more to a place of love and understanding of ourselves. We ought to do it several times each day. open up, remind ourselves. So that's the 2. T, turn from the voice of judgment. The W, claim your worth. And the O is open up. Open up your heart and include yourself in there.
We're going to do a meditation.
Inner place. We can call it the heart. We can call it that place of prana, chi, that inner place where the soul resides in a more pure form, less diluted by the mind. That place within that never judges. And we might even ask the question, how can you do that? How can you never judge? We listen for that answer. Because you are of the Most High. Because you are indeed holy. Because you are the presence of love come down to this planet to express love. So if our mind goes to anything for which we feel we can't forgive ourselves or we can't see it without judging, just know that the soul knows. And we ask, transform my mind. Transform it so that I also may not judge. Give me understanding as I learn really how to love myself. Dr. David Alexander says, the seeds from which a world that works for everyone will be born by sleeping in the sacred act of radical self-love. So we breathe that in deep into our bellies. Knowing we are that place. We are that seed of transformation. And it is born in the radical self-love we have for ourselves. We open up to it. And realize the presence of joy right there, where we perhaps thought it was missing. We take another deep breath into the belly. And end with such gratitude in our hearts for this life we live, this place we get together, for those around us, and for being a bit more open to the reality of who we are. we can begin to move a little bit and maybe move in our chair, feel ourselves more grounded, feel ourselves in our fingers and toes, and when we're ready, open those beautiful, beautiful eyes.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. The light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are,